You're the author of the book 52 Weeks of Wellbeing, and the book is really designed for individuals, for practical advice people can take away and realistically apply to their everyday life to improve their well-being. And I would absolutely recommend people check it out for that perspective. But also, I think a lot of the advice in here translates to our audience, which is people in L&D, people in HR, people in people roles. So hopefully we're going to dive into the aspects of the book that are really about running an organization, creating a healthy culture, and improving employee well-being overall. Which leads me to the kind of difficult elephant in the room question, and it's whether companies are kind of getting in the way of their own well-being initiatives from succeeding. So quite early in the book, there's a couple of great quotes around this, well-meaning solutions, platforms, ideas, and plans can actually stress us out further unless we create space. Because if someone doesn't have 5 minutes to themselves, these well-meaning solutions will not and do not work. And this really resonated with me because from the outside, looking in at a lot of companies, it feels like they've got good intentions, but they're stuck between those good intentions and actually creating the environment where all the things they plan out of those good intentions work. So, yeah, do you think they're getting in the way of their own initiatives a lot of the time?
So many things I can pick up on. Yeah, let's start with a chunky one. Let's go. Love it. So it comes down to the definition of well-being. Like you say the words and people are, oh, all right, yeah, like some happy clappy rubbish. It's time for like a awareness day or something. But the definition of it really is one's subjective satisfaction with their life, which incorporates so much more than what you think of. When you think of well-being, you're actually thinking of wellness, or work, which is something else entirely. And wellness is a positive mental and physical state. In the wellness industry, you'd have a hot stone massage. This contributes to your satisfaction with your life, but there are two very different things. Now, wellness solutions are aimed at individuals, right? And they can be great, and no one gets into the space at work. I've not met one like masochistic well-being lead yet. However, they bring this in because maybe this worked for me and I found that yoga changes my life. But what they fail to understand is that in a business, say you've got 6 meetings per day, you're spending most of your week sitting still on calls. You don't want a yoga course. You want to step away from meetings a little bit. So when we flip the switch and understand the difference between wellness and well-being, and we start to measure it and treat it like a discipline and understand that when we have happy people, they are more productive, the company returns more in the stock market, then we start to see it's a business priority. So for me, it's a definition issue. And then you can start to understand that each business needs something different, each department needs something different. I think the best flip of it I've heard is that it's not an organization's responsibility to improve your happiness. And you think, oh, that's a bit negative, Ryan. Why are you saying that for? I thought you were an well-being author. All right, bear with. But it isn't their responsibility to improve your happiness, but it is their responsibility not to worsen it. And when we flip that switch, we move away from one-off events and solutions and point apps and stuff like that, which can be hugely helpful. We instead look to creating a flexible, fair, equitable, inclusive future of work where I'm able to focus on what I need to be my best self. When I was 19, I broke my leg and my ankle. I spiraled into a deep depression, as you read in the book, and was in a place where I wanted to take my life, and it wasn't for mum, I wouldn't be here. At that moment, my well-being goals were learn to walk again, get out of debt at 19. Now I'm 33. I want to engage 1 billion people in the betterment of well-being. I'm going to pull a car a marathon distance. I'm the same person, but my goals have changed. Your goals change. Your goals are different to someone else's. So when we flip it, we just say, how do we create the environment where every single Ryan and every single Gary and every single everyone else can focus on what they need? And for me, that's the switch. We focus on well-being while wellness can support. They are two very different things.
It's interesting. Now you mentioned that distinction. Something I hadn't thought about is whether the people responsible for these initiatives are kind of blinded a bit by their bias. So,
Yeah,
like you said, this thing worked for me. So, if I roll this out on a wider scale across my company, then it might improve it for other people. By the same token, we're often not very self-reflective about our consistent habits. So rather than saying this thing works for me because I do it regularly, maybe focus on those one-off interventions that you mentioned. So I think bias is maybe playing a little bit of a part there.
definitely. But they're like fully well intentioned as well. They never come into this because they think, oh, I want to do harm. This has worked for me in a moment where the circumstance allowed it. However, in the context of the workplace, is it specific? I would prefer to work in a workplace that had a better meeting culture and didn't send emails at 24/7 than having a load of solutions. And this is why we found that Oxford Uni's research recently found that most wellbeing interventions actually worsen subjective wellbeing. I'm like, again, like the research is okay. They asked the point A how you are, they asked the point B. That fails to understand again that people in different circumstances need different things. So again, we need to like flip the switch from looking at these one point single solutions to actually saying what do these like diverse group of individuals need? And there are a few things that work for everyone, and that is flexibility, pay transparency, inclusive culture. They're the things we need to focus on, but they're the hardest. Much easier to put on an event, say congratulations, capture a load of qualitative feedback, say how good the feels were. But if you want to get the scope, the resource, the finance to actually make some change, then we need to flip the switch and treat it like a discipline. We need to measure it. We need to look at actual ROI instead of qualitative feedback. But that's going to take some brave person in an L&D team or HR team, because they're about to assess their own homework and find out they got an E, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've had a similar conversation on some episodes before, but this idea that it's easy to maybe gravitate towards a thing we think shows a lot of impact because it involves a lot of people. And that kind of misses all the nuance that you mentioned. So, for example, I've spoken to someone about volunteering days, and although they maybe work because at a surface level, everyone is coming together to do something that at a surface level seems worthwhile, actually, it never taps into how many of those people are actually engaged in the cause that we want to support at the Wellbeing on the volunteering day. How many of those people actually use their skill set on that volunteering day, or they did something completely to them that they saw as a waste of time.
Is another level of it. I'm glad that you said volunteering. Volunteering came out as the top wellbeing intervention with regards to improving subjective wellbeing according to Oxford, but that doesn't say to me that wellbeing is best. It actually says that someone who has the time and doesn't have to work a second job and potentially pick their kids up after school is in a position where they can focus on what they need. So again, it's about how do we create the environment where people can engage with whatever it is they need in the moment. So for me, you got to look one level below the utilization and the subjective score on how like effective it is, and actually look at what are the underlying things stopping people from getting involved or stopping them from continuing with these initiatives. Yeah, super interesting. And the reason why we are where we are, we're just doing loads and loads of effort and throwing stuff at the wall is because one, it's not easy to say we're doing less this next quarter. We're actually turning off all of our solutions and we're going to try and remove some stuff from your day. Wellbeing is not often about more, it's about less.
Yeah.
And secondly, because next to no one does the proper work or analysis using organizational data to measure the effectiveness of their efforts. It's not because they're lazy. No one in this space doesn't want to help. It's because it's disparate, it's sparse, it's siloed, and it takes so much effort to put it all together, and they're just putting out flames.
Yeah.
So it's hard work.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we're going to maybe unpick some of that and get to more of the context. Like it becomes a hamster wheel, so you don't really have space to implement it effectively. And, often because of that, you don't have time to dig into the context. So I think a few of the things we're going to discuss now maybe help people get a bit more of that perspective and dig a bit deeper. But one of the things I love about the book is you write in a very engaging way, and also sometimes in a way where the hard truth just comes across in a way that cuts through the kind of fluffiness that we might see elsewhere. And one of them is you basically just called out work-life balance as nonsense or not existing. And I'd love to dig into your thought process around why that's such an issue.
Well, maybe I just see things super rationally, and this is my bias, right? So maybe you might disagree with me, and that's cool. Do your thing. You don't have to agree. But then for me, like you say, work-life balance, there is no balance between the two. Firstly, you're putting work first and life's coming second, which is nonsense unto itself. If we're going to do it, life needs to come first. Work is actually one element of life. So it's simply life, which work is one part of. And when it says you're looking for balance, you almost like we're just leaving it to chance. Like the seesaw is going to level out. But at the end of the day, if your boss wants you at 6 o'clock and you say, oh, sorry, I can't do that. I've got a walk plan with a friend. What's going to win out? That's when you're leaving it to balance. You need boundaries. And in a boundaryless world, it's encroached and encroached and encroached and encroached. While the work week is shorter than it's ever been, according to OECD, it definitely doesn't feel like it, does it?
Absolutely not.
No, it doesn't. But then we're all more tired as burnout is at a record high. And why is that? We're working less hours than before. It's because 57% of our time for those working on laptops is spent on calls and sending emails. We're just talking about the actual work that we're doing, leaving 43% of the day to actually do your work. So now we're like you say, rabbits is really trying to get it done. And we're wondering why we're feeling so stressed out. And there's because of that lack of balance, there's a potential to be contacted at any hour, that we're almost on high alert consistently, that we're going to be asked for one extra thing. And it's just not a way for conducive work if we're constantly being bothered by notifications. We receive on average 80 a day. It takes about 25 minutes to get into a state of focus, essentially meaning that we're never able to focus during the day on quality work. So for me, it isn't about leaving it to balance or to chance, it's about boundaries. And when we implement boundaries, say, well, this is what we expect here, we get clear on what the outcomes are at work. You work in a way that suits you. You can expect not to be contacted outside of hours. I cannot wait for a right to disconnect in the UK. I think it's an amazing thing. And for some reason, people seem to have a real hesitancy for it. Oh, it's going to stop us working hard, or I can't contact people, or I can't work late. Nope, you've misunderstood what they're proposing. You're just not, you can't expect people to respond or call them any hour. You send as many emails as you want. If someone wants to work late, they can work late. And if you're looking for a productivity argument, the French economy has outperformed the UK economy over the same period of time. It's about 20% more efficient. So if it isn't about productivity, and it isn't about getting work done or not being able to do it, I don't know what the argument is.
Yeah.
So for me, screw work-life balance. You
Yeah.
can shove it. I want some boundaries. I want to focus on what I need. I want to produce quality outcomes, and I think that's much better.
Yeah, no, I agree. I've seen some of this backlash against the whole sort of like right to disconnect angle, but you kind of nailed it in the book. You said that basically, if we set clear boundaries, we're going to reduce our stress levels, we're going to improve our well-being, and ultimately, we're both more productive and effective in our personal and professional lives. I think people have equated for too long this idea that if I'm always available, I'll do more work. Yeah. But
Yeah.
what if I actually had better boundaries and therefore I was more energized and I was only online for 6 hours, but they were an incredibly productive 6 hours and I was engaged, I was getting all my best work done. And yeah, I think that's where people just look again at a surface level. I think they overlook that angle that if you have better boundaries, you're a better person in
We,
every aspect.
we saw recently that Man United ordered all their people back to the office 5 days a week.
Yeah.
So Jim Ratcliffe, because email traffic had dropped on Fridays. But not at Manchester United, no. At his
Other
other
companies.
company, Iliad.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, like, he can do what he wants, right? He's young.
Yeah.
Like, it's his prerogative. And if he thinks that's going to drive organizational culture and productivity, fantastic. But I question whether sending emails is a measure of success, firstly.
Yeah.
And secondly, whether email traffic from another company correlates with that one. And then they ordered people back and they didn't have the space in the office for them.
Yes. They were eating their lunch in like weird areas and all
So
this kind of it's weird stuff. Yeah.
it's a bizarre measure of inputs as a level of productivity, where ultimately what matters for them is on the pitch and the stock market value, right? But that work hasn't been done. But there was some work from essentially from the S&P 500. They worked out where people had been mandated back 5 days a week, and they found that the only thing to improve was job dissatisfaction.
Yeah.
It didn't drive any productivity or increase in financial performance. So that goes back to, like, do we want wellness solutions, or do we want an organization that prioritizes well-being, flexibility, trust, belonging? They're the things we need to focus on.
Yeah.
And while they might have all the solutions, they're there 5 days a week now, and you're probably pushing out working parents, predominantly women and mothers.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of an arbitrary decision a lot of the time. From what I hear from people who've been mandated to come back, it really has been dictated and no discussion, which is a real shame.
Yeah, we've seen the pendulum swing back, right? We've seen working from home. It is difficult to collaborate sometimes. It's difficult to, like, create that sense of culture. And when I worked for an organization, we found that attrition for new joiners was 3 times higher during the pandemic than compared to pre, because they joined the business, they didn't feel a sense of connection, they struggled to upskill. So there's a balance to be struck. But ultimately, proximity doesn't equal performance. So it's like we swung the pendulum completely the other way, and imagine we'll settle back at a certain point. But we're just seeing a resurgence and people pushing back against lazy people working from home, as we've seen in quite a few organizations. But we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah. In thinking about that idea of setting boundaries, I mean, what are some of the high leverage things people can do to start setting a clearer boundary between work encroaching into the other areas of their lives?
So difficult, and it's very much dependent a lot of the time on how equipped the manager is to look after a team that can work asynchronously or not. Do you know what I mean? Because if they're someone that that's the manager productivity paranoia is a real thing. And if they're not equipped or feeling confident in managing their team, they
Mm,
want to see them there in proximity because then they'll equate that with performance. However, it's because the team haven't taken the time to work out what the clear outcomes are to be delivered. With my team, I work with say, this is what we need to get done. This is when we need to get it done by. If you need anything, ask me. I expect it to get done regardless of where you sit. I don't actually care.
yeah,
So get it done. And when we do that work, we're able then to put in place the boundaries and think about what's needed. I'm not saying we stop hard at 5:30 every day. If we've got to work late, we've got to work late. This is the real world, right? And you could talk about this like Pollyanna approach to future of work. We switch off at 5:30 every day. That's why people have a hesitancy against the right to disconnect. That's not what this is. However, we will work late sometimes given what we do. But then other times when we're on Friday, midday, we've got nothing else on, we put down tools. So it's about just balance and just flowing with it a little bit. And when you look for those really rigid structures, it makes it difficult. But get clear on the outcomes for a team, and then a manager hopefully will be able to support. The
yeah,
challenge is that 82% of managers in the UK are accidental, according to the CIPD. They tripped into management positions. Oopsie daisy, I'm now a manager. And they have had little support or training. So no wonder they can't support a team, one that's struggling more than ever. 1 in 3 young people now, 18, 24, experiencing poor mental health. And they're expected to support that team immediately because they've been promoted, they've got a new
mm,
title.
yeah,
Almost an impossible task.
yeah. I feel like managers cop unfair flack when it comes to this conversation. So I read some interesting stats from Gallup recently, and it's easy to think managers are the problem when it comes to well-being, but actually managers are more likely to be stressed, more likely to be angry, and lonely than their non-managers. So while it feels like maybe they have this pedigree or real control, actually a lot of the time there is um, open to sort of bad practices and bad culture as anyone else.
There was a piece of research that was done while I was at Deloitte. We found that 97% of managers wanted to support and promote and improve the well-being of their team. There's always outliers,
Yeah,
3% didn't care. But I guess that's to be expected in a big study. But 7 out of 10 found that they were simply unable to due to poor process, bureaucracy, workload, and to what's on their own plates essentially. So they weren't put in a position where they could support, which explains why 70% of the performance of a team or engagement in a team, sorry,
yeah,
the variance is explained by the manager. They're
mm,
according to Gallup. So the manager drives the team. And if we focus there on supporting them to support their team, this would make a huge difference
yeah,
across the business. But right now, we promote them into management positions. They have to continue to deliver on the role while supporting the team pastorally.
yeah,
And they haven't been given any additional support or time to do so. And then it's a recipe essentially to make this manager quite paranoid, try and get the team back in. So if we look there, we can set them up to succeed. But
yeah,
not easy in a remote, digital, flexible world. Much
yeah,
easier when everyone was together for sure. But if
yeah,
we want to create a workplace where people from all demographics, people from previously marginalized backgrounds get the same opportunity, then we have to focus more on getting clear on what the outcomes are,
yeah,
developing better technical digital ways of working. Here's your boundaries. Switch your notifications off. Have email opening windows. Like Shopify added a meeting cost calculator. So every time you
mm,
set up a meeting, you can see the cost of it. That is like genius. And they
mm,
removed about 500,000 meetings. That's where we want to see things.
yeah,
That's like an enlightened future of work, or I
yeah.
hope that we're moving to.
Well, that's kind of the perfect example of getting buy-in because it's a universal truth. Employees view the fact they maybe have too many meetings as damaging to their well-being and ability to perform, and management, who maybe ultimately care about the bottom line, recognize that if they have too many time wasting meetings, that also eats away at productivity and profit. So that's kind of one of the high leverage things, I guess, is understanding where two motivations intersect and where improving that one thing can improve
You
it.
know how you do that? You
Yeah,
measure it. What you treasure, you measure.
yeah,
You have to essentially get the whole business, look at the meeting culture. You can then marry that against the attrition for each area and you have some tiers and then you can calculate a cost of each additional meeting hour.
yeah,
That's where we need to move to.
yeah,
When we do that, we'll be able to lean into the things that have the impact. But until
yeah,
that happens, we are stuck in a place where we have to put on certain events and
yeah,
webinars and apps because we're not going to change it until we understand it's an issue and it's measured.
yeah. Well, one of the
So
best things I liked in later in the book is the meeting audit. And we spoke before we started recording about, a lot of the advice is things that people might expect or they might seem obvious on the surface, but it's something that just isn't being applied. And the meeting audit is a great thing. How many of us have sat down to reflect on our calendar and gone, is there clear objectives for this meeting? Is the cadence correct? Am I actually contributing? And then deciding, right, these ones stay, these ones go, these need to be tweaked. So
Does it finish 5-10 minutes before the hour?
yeah,
You have 6 meetings per day and you cut each one to finish 5-10 minutes early, you'll save 4.8 work weeks worth of effort this year.
yeah.
So
When you frame it like that,
that's this little things that matter. Well-being
yeah,
is no small thing, but it's made up of small things.
yeah,
And it's the little things that we focus on every single day that contribute to a happy, joyous, fulfilled, productive life.
yeah,
So it isn't about creating hours. It's not about wellness days. It's not about having hours off. It's just about having a little bit to move in between calls or
yeah,
supporting people at the end of a shift to switch off. Like, it's much more simple than we think. We've overcomplicated
yeah.
what essentially just needs a little bit of space.
Yeah, I agree. We often over-engineer complex solutions to a problem that can be solved much more simply. Like you say, right, let's put in a meeting around well-being, or like this lunch and learn, for example, that only adds the problem of there's already too much in my calendar. And there's a section on why back-to-back meetings are bad for well-being and productivity. But you said that people who take breaks between meetings are able to reset their brain stress, whereas people in back-to-back meetings, their stress increases. And when we consider that, the Gallup report that came out recently, all of the stats are that stress in particular as an emotion is almost pretty much at an all-time high for employees. It is, like you say, such a simple tweak that will have such a massive benefit.
Massive. They put the shower caps on people, the
Yeah,
brain
yeah,
scanners,
yeah,
and they did like back-to-back meetings, and they could see the damage cognitively on the brain. You're sitting there, you're not moving, and just with tiny little breaks, it makes a huge difference. And instinctively when you've been back to back to back to back, how your cognitive performance is affected.
yeah,
You just have to think about it. You don't need a study, you don't need me to tell you that. But
yeah.
then it takes like a collective to change that, and it's the little tweaks. And if everyone here at JAAQ now, all meetings are 5-10 minutes early. I won't have
Mm,
it. I'll decline if it's 30 minutes or an hour.
yeah,
I'll be like, send it back at 25 or 45.
yeah,
And if we can't do it in that time, then we'll put in multiple sessions,
yeah,
because I need a chance to write up my notes, to get clear on what my next session is. Then I can turn up to that one more prepared, and then
mm,
we can finish that one early. We can actually then use our time to get our work done.
yeah,
Right, but it has to be a collective effort, and I found that quite simple, but like team charter exercises, so everyone can say, what are my needs? Well, I'm picking up kids at this time. I'm doing something
mm,
else. I can communicate how I like to work with people. Chances are most teams haven't done that.
yeah,
That's pretty fundamental basics for a team to operate, is to understand how people want to operate. And
yeah.
we have pre-organized learning curriculums to teach them how to do this in this style. But if you ask people what they need, you start there, then we can move forwards.
Yeah. Yeah. Funny enough, we had a team day recently where we did this user manual exercise, because I think to everything we've discussed so far, boundaries don't happen by accident. Clarity on what's good for other people in your team doesn't happen by accident. And the exercise was 10 minutes where we present how we like to work, how we like to be communicated with, when we do our best work, how we do our best work. And just these simple high level things like, this person likes to work 8 till 4. This person blocks out this time in their calendar as a non-negotiable. Lots of these small things where it's like, unless you are clear about that, you'll never know how someone else works best.
I set that up in the team at Deloitte about 5 years ago,
Mm.
and they rolled that out across all the consultants in the UK. So now it's something they do, that every time someone new comes into the team or a project team is set up.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's a huge step forwards, like straight away, isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah. Coming back to these individual boundaries, the thing I liked most and resonated with me is, you mentioned non-negotiables, and one of my non-negotiables is to turn off all my notifications for everything but WhatsApp, and to have none of my work apps on my phone. And I see in my friends and colleagues people who are doing this work doom scrolling, where they kind of compulsively open the same work apps to scroll and see if they miss something. But a lot of the time you've missed nothing, because nothing is happening at that quick a pace, or you're often with other people from work. So do you need to check everything so compulsively? And it's kind of like this work doom scrolling idea. But is that a good place to start? Actually think mindfully, why do I have certain apps on my phone? Are they contributing to my well-being, or are they detracting from it? And then setting a boundary around that.
Yeah. So it's interesting. You think about the inside outside work thing. I'm about to do a second TED talk actually on the secret to well-being, and the second ingredient for me, there are three, is quality time, and something that's completely neglected. We always talk about adding more in, to do an extra thing, to go to the gym, to meditate, to invest. We don't say, oh no, let's actually remove something before we consider putting something else in. I, like you, I don't have any notifications. I don't even have WhatsApp. I don't even have my girlfriend's notifications on. So, but she knows that. Otherwise, I'm checking it all the time. So the only thing that comes up are alarms and a ding if I have another meeting, but that's it. No work apps, no emails, no notifications from any social media. I totally agree, and I'm trying to get better at checking it less. But the black screen always has a strong pull, doesn't it? Um, but yeah, no, it's exactly the same thing. And if you think, as I said, about the number of distractions and the time it takes to get into a state where you can focus, if you're constantly checking in your emails, the likelihood is that you're never able to get into a state where you can do some deep work. And Neil Stevenson, the writer of Snow
Yeah.
Crash, you know that?
Yeah.
He says, I hope you can forgive me for being a bad correspondent. I'm trying to produce quality pieces of work.
Yeah.
He says he might not be good on socials. He might not respond to emails at all, but he's focusing on producing what he wants to produce.
Yeah.
And most of us prioritize more the importance of responding to a message quickly than we do actually doing our work.
Yeah.
We've completely got it confused. And as you say, we'll have LinkedIn up, we'll have emails up, we'll have Slack up.
Yeah.
And that's what we focus on. But that's not what you're paid to do. Emails are not work unless you're an SDR or something. Potentially you get measured in emails. But for most of us, emails are not work.
Yeah.
So I challenge you just to close your emails off and check them 4 times a day.
Yeah, there's this idea, that's the tip on being instantly unavailable, which I really liked. It's, this idea that you feel obligated to say yes to things, but if you say yes to everything, you can't do the high leverage things that are worth your time or that will have the highest return to your employer. So, if you only respond to Slacks between certain windows and it means that you can focus on the key output of your job, people, you might feel obligated to reply to them, but they're not the things that have the high return on your effort, really, are they? Or your well-being.
Just because a message is instant doesn't mean that you need to be.
Yeah.
But we are driven and controlled by them. So it is a real challenge to step away and you feel like you're missing out. You get that sense of like work FOMO, don't you? Like, oh, what's happening? Like, am I missing something? No, you're not. Like, focus on your work, check it in the windows, you'll find you can get a lot more done, then you won't be working as late. Then we won't even need a right to disconnect because we get all our stuff done in work hours. But we are where we are because the workday feels like it's elongated, or at least messages are, because we're not having the time to focus on what we need to in the day.
Yeah.
So things like that, time boxing your notifications, removing work notifications on your phone. I do have my work email on here, but I don't check it outside of hours.
Yeah.
People, they pay for my time inside here. I produce a lot in that time. You shouldn't be doing it every hour during the day. That's not conducive to a happy, healthy, or productive work environment. And ultimately, that will lead to people getting disillusioned. That's why we're working less now, but we're feeling more burnt out. And it's exactly for that reason.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, another tip personally that I really took away was the definitive yes. So only saying yes when you should say yes, or you don't have doubts about it being a useful yes to say. I could say at the back of a meeting, can someone pick this up? And I might feel obligated to say yes, but it doesn't feel like the yes in terms of I'm the best person to own this. Yes, I have capacity to do it. And you can fall into this trap of saying yes to things in the moment, but what's best for you to do is, if it's not a definitive yes, to just come back to it later and take time away from it.
It was Greg McKeown who I picked that up from first, who wrote Minimalism. And Matthew McConaughey talks about it as well. It's like a full body yes. Like if you're asked to do something 6 months in advance, in the UK, we will do anything to avoid saying no. We'll be like, potentially, maybe, let me check, let me circle back, let me check my diary, let me check my other half. Because we just want to avoid any sort of like confrontation or a no and a question. However, I default to no now. I'm like, if it isn't a yes, even if it's 6 months away and it's not something I would do tomorrow, I'll say no.
Yeah.
Because I get asked to do quite a lot now, a lot of podcasts. This was an immediate yes, you know what I mean?
Thank you. Appreciate that.
But like, get asked to do a lot of things after work, going to speak at certain things, attend events. And if I did that, I would be out every single evening during the week, which would then have a detrimental effect on the work that I'm able to do and to give back. So I have to think, what is my purpose? What do I want to get done? Is this contributing towards my sense of well-being or my productivity, what I want to produce, what my team are working on? If the answer is a no, then I'm pushing back and I'll deal with the awkwardness immediately to avoid being at a stupid event I don't want to be at for 4 months in the future.
The other side of the coin is actually you probably help other people's well-being by just giving the definitive yes. So for example, if someone's planning an event and they invite you and you just know it's not the event for you, saying yes and then knowing you're not going to go, or going and not necessarily contributing to the conversations at the event, like actually you don't bring anything to the event, which means that that person stresses about attendance to the event. They stress about the quality of the event. There's all these trade-offs actually where a lot of the time an honest yes improves someone else's because they know definitively up front this person's not coming to the event. I need to fill extra space, for example.
It's tough for sure, like, but you have to kind of deal with that immediate slight amount of awkwardness to save yourself a lot of grief later and to
Yeah,
help that other person as well.
yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm a trying to reform myself, a former people pleaser, but I am terrible. I used to be so bad at saying no to people, and it wasn't beneficial for anyone. So I am trying to set that as a more intentional boundary to be like, you know what, I'm going to add nothing to this, so I'll say no. Or I already have enough on that week, so I might as well just say I'm not meeting. Like, let's not meet now. Let's do it another time, so I can be present or not have the back-to-back meetings. So I guess it's a habit of saying no.
Something we've got to break out. You owe
Yeah,
it to yourself and everyone around you and what you
yeah,
want to contribute to, right?
yeah, definitely. I can't believe I waited 32 minutes to ask you about the thing I like most in the book, but the idea of the rest ethic. I've never heard this term before, and it's so true. You make the point that we're so quick to praise someone for their work ethic, but we don't treat the rest ethic the same. Even though if someone had clear boundaries around when they rest, they might be a better friend, a more productive employee, they might be an all-round nicer human to be around. So it's this idea of, like you say, unpicking the myth that more equals more. So how can we kind of work on our rest ethic, and how did you settle on this idea as well?
It's kind of pinched from a book I read as well by Max Finzel, I believe it was, like the idea of the rest ethics. It was pulled in from great thinkers elsewhere, so it's an amalgam of thoughts. But it essentially we valorize people who sit at their desk all day and seem to be productive. But I know plenty of people who spend a very long time at work who are absolutely useless, and I know loads of people who work flexibly and potentially work less, but are ultimately super productive. So I say now, like, judge me on what I produce, the positive effect I have on people around me, not how long I sit here doing it. Because it's about outcomes. And again, it's that shift of thinking. Or is it the number of emails we send, or is it the impact I have on clients? Is it the quality I produce to people I'm serving? So when we do that and we flip that switch again, taking like a data-led approach to what we're doing, measuring, setting KPIs, then we're able to switch off. I want to see people celebrated. For instance, at an all hands, you often hear, oh, they worked all night, or they were absolutely grafting for the client, or they had to do Saturday, Sunday. You see it consistently. But I rarely see, oh, Sally did this. She managed to deliver for the client. It's 10 out of 10 on NPS, and she finished at 3 o'clock on Friday. That deserves more applause because Sally can clearly manage her shit, get it done without having to work every hour. It's probably more productive, more efficient, and better managing her diary and expectation of the client. But we seem to think that if we have to work harder for it, it's better.
Yeah, yeah,
It's bizarre, but it takes work. And I was in the book I wrote about. I went to Mexico. I'd been laid off the second time.
mm,
I just got the role at Deloitte that I was looking for to build out the wellbeing consultancy they take to market. It's the role I wanted. I worked my butt off all summer to get that role, interviewing every other day, spending so much time on sites and stuff like that. So I got the role. I'd achieved what I wanted to. There was a gap. There was no need for me to do anything in this gap. There was nothing
yeah,
to work on. I had the role started. The rest of it was behind me. And I was in Mexico and I was just like checking my phone and looking at my emails and looking at LinkedIn. I was like, what the chuff are you doing? I was like, this is the one time you can switch off. So then I
yeah,
started challenging myself to leave my phone at home or in the hotel a bit more. So I did that. And that's why I went on this walk again from Vigo to Porto, was to do that. So I deleted social apps off my phone, got rid of work emails and everything else, and just focused on getting up each day, going for a walk, having a nice glass of wine, having some good grub, getting my nut down, and then go
yeah,
and walk again the next day. And I come back now, I feel refreshed, I'm
yeah,
ready to go. That's what we want to do because it's about over the long run. There is no productivity without well-being in the long run, but there
yeah,
is productivity well-being without productivity. Do you know what I
mm,
mean? So we have to focus on what we need for long, sustained peak performance because we're doing this for 40 years.
yeah,
You can do the sprints, you can lean in, you can do the late evenings. If they're consistent, you won't be able to show up for
yeah,
yourself, for your loved ones, or for your work. And that's a fact. And
yeah,
we see it with high-flying professionals and people in partnerships and consultancies and law firms, they get to a certain position, they're ready to retire, and then they drop dead 2 years after they finish.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's not what I want for my future, nor for my team or the people I work with. So I try and exemplify the behaviours we want to see. Difficult, as I said before, like I love what I do, and I'm a bit of a liar as well. So I said, oh, I'm not going to work weekends anymore. I'm 33 now. It's not true, because I am. And I was wanted to do that, but I'm writing a second book. I've got my second TED Talk coming up. I'm in a position where I absolutely love what I do. And I will work weekends, but every morning I go to the gym. I cycle into work and back. I don't look at anything digital after 8 o'clock as I read from 9 o'clock. So I do focus on what I need, even though I have to lean in and probably work a little bit harder than I should. So it's about working out what that rest ethic looks like for you. And as we said before, well-being is no small thing, but made up of small things.
Yeah.
If you improve by 1% every day for a year, you're 3,778% better at the end of the year with compound interest.
Yeah.
That's a reason that Warren Buffett said that compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. That's the same for your well-being, these little things. The best example of it is if you essentially sit there rocking your leg all day, just like this, right? All day, you're just rocking your leg while you're working. For 8 hours, you'll burn 300 calories. And a McDonald's cheeseburger is 290 calories. So you could realistically sit there, move your knee all day, go to the drive-thru on the way home, and you still have 10 calories spare. If you didn't have that cheeseburger, you'd lose 20 pounds this year. Well-being is no small thing, but made up of small things. With the rest ethic, it doesn't have to be days and months and creating loads of space for it. It's just about focusing on the little things that you need to recharge. What you need is different to me, is different to someone else. So take that time to work out what it is and prioritize the hell out of it, and you'll be able to keep showing up for yourself, for others, and you'll smash out of the park at work as well. They come together. It's well-being first, then productivity.
Yeah. Well, it's so fun. There's so many things that I agree with there. I mean, the thing I found most useful personally around the work ethic was to find that sweet spot. So you mentioned that too much work will burn you out, too little work will not challenge you and will just demotivate you. So trying to work out what your sweet spot is in terms of how much work galvanizes you or energizes you would be the thing I learned that I would encourage other people to think about. And the other thing is, actually, you made me reflect on myself there on your story about being between jobs. And so many people say, I really want to hit the ground running. What can I do to get up to speed? Can you send me X, Y, and Z to look at before I start?
Your time, mate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just realized how stupid that is, because what if I just spent 3 weeks disconnecting and then came in really energized and refreshed and ready for a fresh start, and my brain was rested and all this kind of stuff I neglected.
You can get up to scratch, but when you start, you're going to do that in the evenings anyway. There's going to be the tacit knowledge that you got to accumulate, the relationships you got to develop. You're going to get it all then.
Yeah.
Why don't you cut it down and say, you're going to do some anyway. Just do a week of research, switch off for 2 instead of doing 3 part.
Yeah.
Compromise.
Yeah.
Draw a line, say this is what I'm going to do, and then you can satisfy that work gremlin in your head. No, all right, I'm going to get a week done. 2 weeks, oh, I'm off.
Yeah. The work gremlin, he's always there. I think it's like we said earlier, setting boundaries so that it doesn't encroach too much. On this point of work, rest ethic as well, you really made me think about a point someone made to me ages ago. But if we continue to praise people who go above and beyond and put their own well-being at the expense of reaching an outcome, we often then focus on the outcome happened. So, right, we hit our targets, everyone had to work late for it, but the journey just disengages your team and demoralizes them and ensures that they're less likely to go on the journey with you the next time. So if you all had to put in an extra 20 hours this month to reach our target, yes, we hit the target, but we can't sustain that. And over the process of everyone going above and beyond, in quotes, which is one of my least favorite sayings, we really lose people, and that has a compound effect as well. The more we have to push ourselves above and beyond to hit something, the less likely we are to be engaged and willing to do it in the future, I think.
Well, this is why 10% of the UK is now engaged at work, right? Which is a record low, so almost at single digits, meeting the French and the Italians at the bottom of the pile.
Yeah.
It's also the reason why poor mental health costs the UK economy between 51 and 120 billion, depending whether you listen to Deloitte or McKinsey. Deloitte being more conservative, McKinsey being more aggressive with the figures. Regardless, it is a shitload of money. The reason why we're not looking there is because we're looking at the EBITDA, the sales, the revenue, the profit, which is understandable because a business has to make money. But to have well-being be treated seriously like a discipline, like sales or marketing or something else, And to be able to invest and change the things that happen, we have to look at why people are leaving, the cost of that to the business, the absenteeism, the attrition. And when we do that, it will then change. But until we do that, we're going to continue to valorize anything that results in improved performance being measured on only one thing. But you also have to look at the downside and the cost. And often, if you were to pull your foot off the accelerator by 2%, you'd probably save a fair bit of grief for a lot of people, keep them in the business, and ultimately only potentially impact the sales a tiny bit. If you then put the two against each other, the business will be more profitable. So it's a really interesting place, and this discipline and thinking is coming on with research from Deloitte, McKinsey, the Oxford Wellbeing Research Centre, all those places, but it's still nascent. I saw today, catching back up with the EFT, that there is now a happy index fund, a happy ETF, and I can't remember the name of the place that did it, but essentially the happy index fund takes a human capital score, a mix of Glassdoor and sentiment, and then applies that to the happiest organizations in the US. And you can now invest in this fund. And this fund has increased by about 26 and a bit percent over the past year, beating the S&P by about 4.5%.
Right.
So happy organizations outperform non-happy organizations with regards to stock performance. We know that happy people, higher sense of satisfaction results in better sales. We saw that at BT, a 13% increase in sales with a 1-point increase in subjective well-being. So now this discipline and this research is evolving. I hope that will shift to start to look at creating happy, not just happy. Happy is the wrong word for me because it's an emotion which is temporary. I've been upset, but I've still had a positive sense of well-being. So it's almost just like one part of it. But when we focus on creating a culture where we can be well, whatever that looks like for you or for me, the organization will perform better with regards to what they're trying to achieve and what they return for shareholders, stockholders, and everyone else. So it's changing, it's taken time, but legacy behaviors persist. And the people that are leading the businesses are those that have had to go above and beyond, as you say, working late. And if they had to do it, why shouldn't everyone else?
Yeah, I think it comes.
That's the attitude. That's what I come up against a lot. Well, it's the way it's always been. It's sales. Tough shit. If you don't like it, go elsewhere. And then I say, well, does increased working hours or an additional email being sent result in increased performance? No. But you have to do the work to find that out.
It's to your earlier point. It takes a brave person to go, look, we need to, if we sacrifice this amount of profit in the short term over each quarter, actually employee happiness, well-being, satisfaction, engagement is going to go up this amount. And actually over the long term, we're more likely to sustain profit, because short-termism can become the sort of enemy of these.
In most instances, if you actually then take your foot off a tiny bit, you will actually increase profitability, because that's what we're seeing with the 4-day work week trials, which are more positive than they are negative. It remains to be seen whether it works for every organization. There's lots of interesting trials and improvements in performance in government entities and whatnot. But the chances are you probably won't impact sales at all if you work a couple of hours less. You just have to focus on creating space in the workday. If you just said, all right, cut this, don't change any working practices, yes, that will impact. But if you then take an innovative future of work approach, focus on the thing is creating some space for people, getting clear on the outcomes of the different roles, things will change. But it isn't a panacea like unlimited paid vacation, like people that hate it. There's a real negative stigma attached to it. But I rolled it out with an organization. We managed to increase the number of vacation days by 6 per person average across a 10,000 person organization, with continued increased performance across the business as well, showing that inputs definitely don't equal outputs. So they are very different things, but what works for one doesn't work for another. But again, it comes back to that place. How do we create an environment where everyone can do exactly what they need to be their best self?
Yeah, I think that leads us perfectly on to the last point, because you mentioned the idea of the Pareto principle, or I should enunciate more, the Pareto principle, but the idea that 80% of returns come from 20% of the effort. And that the way we can do this as people and as organization is to find those cornerstone habits, the ones that actually have high leverage. And I read the book a couple of weeks ago, and then the other day I realized I was doing this myself. I was putting some salt in my water in the morning in order to hydrate more. And then I just thought, well, did I even drink enough water the day before? No. So the cornerstone habit would be, I should just drink more water, and then I don't need to do the little high end of the pyramid thing. But are there any advice for how organizations can find these kind of cornerstone habits, the ones that have high return in the context of their organization?
Yeah, again, you probably know what I'm going to say. It goes back to like the measurement, right? You need
Mm,
to cross-reference the sentiment, what people say with like the IT data, the HR data,
mm,
and then you'll get to the crux of what the challenge is. Often we're dealing with the surface issues. People are feeling stressed, so
mm,
we put on a stress webinar as opposed to looking at what is causing the underlying stress. What with regards to cornerstone habits, the way I was thinking about it is for an individual. Me, it's just getting up early. And to get up early, I need to go to bed early. And to go to bed early, I need to get off my phone at 8. And to get off my phone at 8, I have to get everything wrapped before. So for me, it's putting my phone into another room at 8 o'clock on charge. That's my cornerstone habit. If I do that, I'm able to start to power down. I can get to bed at 10. I can get up at a decent time. I can then take some time to eat in the morning. I can get to the gym. I can do a bit of visualization. But where I push it slightly later, it affects everything the following day, like you and your
mm.
soul.
Yeah.
There are going to be cornerstone habits for the organization, but I would say the key thing is the measurement and insight. If you do that, it will unlock the buy-in from the C-suite, from everyone else, and make it a priority inside the business.
Yeah.
Difficult to do, but if that's done and the reporting is regular and we can treat it like a discipline, as much respect as any other part of the business, then the dominoes will fall. I promise. Because when they see how much money they're losing from people walking out the door due to stress and other preventable issues, it will then get addressed.
Mm.
And for me, that is the cornerstone.
Yeah. And the best thing about leading with data, if you know the data you're looking for, you can actually be proactive rather than reactive. So the data is less messages sent outside of work hours. Well, you could look at Slack and look in the breakdown of data there to see what is already sent before the survey tells you it's a problem.
It exists a lot of the time, and most of the work and effort that I see being put in, again, from people wanting to make a difference, is off of feelings,
Yeah.
emotions, and sentiment. And that's just not how a business operates. It needs to be
Yeah.
one element of an approach, but it's not it in its entirety. So it's an evolution of how this field is viewed and shifting from wellness to well-being. And again, it's the definition or the word, you can call it the future of work function,
Yeah.
colleague experience, whatever the hell you're like, but the outcome is a sense of well-being. A sense of well-being then drives productivity, performance, reduces attrition, reduces absenteeism, increases engagement, increases job satisfaction. There's your cornerstone.
Yeah. That is brilliant. I think that's a great note to end on. You're on this mission, Ryan, to reach 1 billion people, improve their well-being. So hopefully we've reached a few more people today. And if they want to get more advice from you, follow more of this in practice, then the links to connect with you on LinkedIn and everywhere else, and to check out the book will be in the description below. But just a massive thank you again for coming on to speak with us.
Pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.